Welcome to Imaginary Creatures, my exhibition of mythological or otherwise fictional creatures in art from around the world. I would like the visitor to be entertained and gain an understanding of the meanings or uses of crazy creatures in art. My audience is kids, adults, and anyone who likes wild-looking creatures. This isn't meant to be controversial, just a lighthearted look at crazy creatures from around the world. My installation will be presented in a large, well-lit hall with a light golden pattern on the walls that I think is subtle enough not to interfere with the pieces, but shows sort of the whimsy of the subject matter. The painting and prints will be hung on the wall, but the large statues will be set a bit far away from the wall so that people can walk around them and see them from all angles, as was intended by the original artists. The pieces would be arranged roughly in the order of the units that we studied, but as I said, it would be a large open hall so people could sort of mingle around and look at them in whatever order they chose if they wanted to. I would have brochures so that people could refer to something that they're, holding and carrying with them when they look at it in any order, and so that they have something to take home, particularly because many of these pieces were originally prints that were available for people to have and take home. Let's begin with the Manticore, which has the head of a man, the teeth of a shark, the body of a lion, and a tail covered with poisonous quills that it was said to be able to throw at passers-by. This was illustrated by Edward Topsell in 1607 in his printed book, History of Four-Footed Beasts. Now, this was meant to be a real scientific book detailing, it had lots of real animals in it, but it also had lots of pretend animals that Edward Topsell apparently did not know were pretend at the time. He writes in his book that he doesn't claim to have seen all of these creatures, but he bases it on the account of various educated men. And at this time, people were trying to be more scientific about things and research them in a organized way, rather than thinking about things as being magical or something like that. But there was still a lot of misinformation. You really couldn't easily go to a place far away or get an account of somewhere far away. So it's kind of, you're getting like playing a game of telephone, getting these weird fifth-hand accounts of creatures that may or may not exist. Some of the mythical creatures in this book were based on real animals or strange description of real animals. I don't think this one was. I think it's kind of funny. He's got a little mustache above his shark teeth. But this was not meant to be symbolic. It was meant to be a real creature. But at the time, people just did not know. This next piece is a more romantic, symbolic work. It's by Raphael Sanzio in 1506, Young Woman with a Unicorn, painted in oil. This was meant to be an engagement or a wedding portrait. Apparently, originally, she was meant to be holding a dog, which was a symbol of fidelity in marriage, but the marriage was called off, but they still wanted to make the portrait, so he changed it to a unicorn, which was meant to symbolize chastity and virtue. Maybe this was going to be her portrait for suitors going forward, and they wanted to show that she was still chaste. Now, carrying on the tradition of very symbolic mythical creatures is this Qilin statue made of bronze at the Summer Palace in Beijing. I couldn't find the name of a specific artisan or artist who created it, but I know it was commissioned by the Qianlong Emperor in 1749 when he was redecorating the gardens around the Summer Palace in honor of his mother's 60th birthday. The Qilin is a creature that sort of represents royalty. It represents intelligence and wisdom. I have a picture of another version where it's carrying scrolls on its back, I think to show the wisdom. It represents wisdom, harmony, and royalty in the sense that it was said to appear during the reign of a just emperor. It represented the mandate of heaven, which meant that, the gods were saying that that emperor was the correct one. During the Qing dynasty, when this statue was created, this Qilin creature was also the symbol of high-ranking military officials. And you can sort of describe this creature as being the head of a dragon, the body of a horse, scales like a serpent, and sometimes it was shown to have fire all around it. So it had a lot of things going on to be a protective creature or a strong or a fast creature. And I think the emperor meant to show military might and that he was a just emperor when he created this. So far, we've seen mythical creatures being presented as real or as symbols for general virtues or ideas. This next piece depicts a real historical figure and a mythical creature that sort of represents a specific battle or event. This ukiyo-e woodblock print, currently housed at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, is by Utagawa Kuniyoshi, created in the 19th century. It's hard to pin down an exact date because it is a print that was reprinted many times. Kuniyoshi often combined historical facts and mythical stories, and in this one, Takayasha the Witch and the Skeleton Spectre, it's about Takayasha the princess whose warlord father was killed after rebelling against the emperor. And this giant skeleton is meant to be the combined ghosts of all of her men that were killed in the battle, which is unusual. I've never seen anything like that in Western culture. It almost reminds me of the modern Japanese kids shows where all the robots combine into one giant creature. In this specific story, the skeleton seems to represent the princess's vengeance, or perhaps the way that an army of men can act as one giant entity instead of individuals and come together that way. And I think the composition of this piece really adds an element of tension and horror that the other ones did not have, in that they were mostly just presenting the animals, whereas this is very creepy. Moving into the later Western era, we have Frank Lloyd Wright's Sprites at Midway Gardens. They were originally installed in the Chicago Midway Gardens in 1914. The Midway Gardens were torn down, and now they reside at the Arizona Biltmore Resort and Spa. They are concrete statues about 6 feet tall. Frank Lloyd Wright was more known for architecture than for sculpture, but in this case, he did some landscape design for this gardens of, I guess what you call it now, a shopping center. At the time, they didn't call it that. These statues are known usually as sprites or nymphs or fairies, alternately by different people, and they're not really meant to represent any particular myth or legend besides just being inspired by sort of the nature spirits of Greek, Roman, and many other mythologies. They're really more meant to be decorative and inspire a peaceful mood. Frank Lloyd Wright was considered a modernist by many people, but some say he wasn't part of the mainstream modernist movement because he had an interest in nature. And I think it's very interesting the way he's given these nature spirits a modern feel by creating them completely out of flat planes and blocks, which doesn't seem like it would work, but it really does. They're very pretty. And that brings us to a contemporary of Frank Lloyd Wright, Alphonse Mucha. Mucha was known for his posters and advertising work. This particular one, Kissing Mermaids, this lithographic print, was reprinted in 1982 under the supervision of his son. I'm not sure when it was originally printed. These mermaids aren't depicted as literal mermaids that you might see in other works, a person with a fishtail. They're sort of shown as fluid, ethereal creatures in front of a background of stars. And it's more meant to evoke a mood, maybe the way that people feel when they kiss, or just to show that they're very free. And I think it shows how in modern times people are taking traditional motifs and reinterpreting them and turning them around on their head because we've all seen them so many times at this point. While all these creatures contain elements of things from nature, their final concrete form is something that was designed completely by people, and it sort of shows what sort of meanings people were trying to put into it. For example, Edward Topsell was even trying to be objective and just report on different animals of the world, but so many strange creatures ended up in this book, it sort of shows the way that scholars can tell how words used to be pronounced by looking at misspellings in old writings. You can see in this picture whatever bias Edward Topsell had, whether something was lost in translation in descriptions of animals from other countries, or it shows some sort of fear of foreign places, like there's crazy creatures in India and Asia, and don't ever go there, you'll get eaten by a lion man with a poison tail. Then we see the symbolic creatures that are sort of supposed to relate something about their master, like the unicorn and the Qilin are supposed to embody different virtues relating to the person that they represent, whether it be the young lady that was getting married or the emperor who commissioned the piece. The giant skeleton also represents the witch princess who summoned him and her vengeance, but he's also part of a narrative. And you see in this piece that he's supposed to be scary, that maybe the viewer is supposed to imagine themselves in a story. So it takes that representative status and takes it a little further. Then we see in the more modern pieces that they're a bit more abstract. They're maybe just meant to evoke a mood or nostalgia for these myths, and they're used in a decorative way. Like, you wouldn't see a modern presidential portrait with a unicorn or a dragon in it. It's not taken seriously in that way anymore. I hope my exhibition has inspired you to look up more imaginary creatures in art, and thank you for watching.